You know, before I talk about this game, I should probably put this up. There we go. Cool. Freaking clouds. So, Mario 64 DS version specifically. Story, wash. Story presentation, wash. Core gameplay, thumbs up. Gameplay presentation, depends. Here's the thing. How many of you have extremely fond memories of Mario 64? How many of you have ever even played Mario 64 DS? Not you, Peach. Peach! Trying to talk here. So rude. So, how many of you have played Mario 64 on the DS? Bonus question. How many of you knew it was a remake? A proper remake, no less. It is a full remake of the original, with new levels and completely changed levels in many, many, many respects. Controls are different, physics are different, flight is different, which makes a lot of the flying levels a lot smoother if you're not, if you're not already having issues with that. New game, new players, which play differently, new power-ups, all sorts of new stuff. It is a remake of Mario 64. It was put together after Mario Sunshine by people who had looked at Mario 64 and said, we could do better than that. And it was just something they threw together. And then it kind of had to include the DS gimmick, because of course it did, but that's just Nintendo being Nintendo at that point, isn't it? So, I mentioned this because I feel like they didn't really properly explain that this was, a new game in many respects. After all, how many of you knew that New Yoshi's Island on the DS is actually a completely separate game than Yoshi's Island? Anyways, so, the reason I bring all this up, though, I don't actually remember Mario 64 all that fondly. Kind of. Because there's something that we actually came up with a term for at about this point, historically speaking, which is Sunshine Syndrome. Sunshine Syndrome is a game where a portion of the game, usually like the first intro part of it, is really fun and interesting and engaging, and you love replaying it, right? And when you think of that game, that's what you think of. And there's usually a point in the game at which it stops being fun to replay it. And honestly, you usually put it down at that point. I bet you right now you could think of a dozen examples of games like that right off the top of your head. I can too. I can think of quite a few different games where it's like, yeah, I love replaying this part. Right off the top of my head, Final Fantasy XII and Neverwinter Nights 1 both qualify. Neverwinter Nights 1 Vanilla both qualify for that exact same concept. It's actually really normal in game development for the first part of the game to be better than the latter part of the game. The ones that actually nail the outro or retain quality, or heaven forbid, even increasing quality, tend to be the exceptions. And it's logical why. Developers get tired, they run out of ideas, they're running up against a deadline, they run out of money. Like, stuff happens, right? So it makes perfect sense in most games that the quality kind of does this over the course of time. But Sunshine Syndrome is a specific variant of that, where there's a noticeable point where it's like, yep, I'm good. Because then it starts doing this, like it just goes right over the cliff at that point. Could be for a lot of different reasons. Maybe it's a story reason, like in Star Ocean 3, no spoilers. Or maybe it's for a purely gameplay reason, like in, Super Mario Bros. 1, right, on the NES. There's a certain point of the game you're just like, yeah, I'm good, and you stop it. I'm bringing all of this up because that is Mario 64 for me. Going back through it, especially with the DS version, reminded me of how great the first few levels are. How fun and interesting and engaging. And there's even still some challenging stuff early on. And it's just, yes! And then, like, it peaks a little bit because you get to the Ghost House, which is awesome, as the Ghost Houses have basically always been across the Mario history. And then you get to Lethal Lava Land, which is fantastic. One of the best stages of the game, in my opinion. And then there's the Hazy Maze Cave. And the Shifting Sands. And it's like, pretty much, that's like the line, right? It's just like, oh, okay, it's time to put the game down. Now, I'm not saying there aren't good levels after that, because there are, but you see what I mean, right? The reason I bring all this up is I'm curious how much of this applies to any of you, for pretty much the exact same reasons. I will say this. So, I mentioned new math, new formulas. The actual reviews haven't changed. So there's no new Oblivion line, memes, But Mario 64 DS got a 58.3 golden number. That's right below average, so that's an averagely good game. And honestly, most of that is just it being dragged down by the lower parts of the game. Mario 64, as in the original N64 version, got a 15.8. And I stand behind that. But even I wasn't really expecting that score to go up that substantially. See, this boss fight, this is all the Mario 64 fans who are descending upon me with rigorous fervor right now. I wasn't expecting that. Because while I enjoyed Mario 64 to the DS, I didn't realize just how much better of a thing it is. You're probably thinking, what's so better about it? Individual, tiny details that I couldn't recite for you without just pulling up a list and sharing it. They changed how certain levels... Wrong. They changed how certain platforms were in certain levels. They changed the height or the width, or maybe they added another thing here. They changed how the enemies worked. They changed how some of the power-ups worked. Some of the placement of certain items, some of the collision boxes. It's a refinement pass of the game, right? And a lot of levels that were aren't anymore. And so things that had been negatives in the previous version aren't, because they're just not irritating anymore because of that additional polishing pass. And that's why this version raised up for me, and it's why I recommend it to anybody who can get a hold of a copy through extremely legal means and go ahead and give it a playthrough if you never have. Now, there are two big negatives to the DS version that are exclusive to the DS version. One of which is the graphics. They don't look great. They look pretty blurry and pretty flurgy. And there's nothing for that. I have nothing else to add to that. It's a DS game. The second problem, though, is the controls. So here's the thing. I kind of prefer these controls, but I was also playing with an analog control stick, and it's worth noting that Mario 64 DS can support analog input. But if you play it on an actual DS with just the D-pad, your controls are going to be a lot worse because of the fact that you only have that 8-directional movement, right? Or 4-directional movement. So I strongly recommend you get the ability to do it. Like, you could just play it, for example, on a 3DS, and it will actually take the analog input and appropriately work for that, and it's going to be so much better. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to everyone hating me in the comments below. Right now, we're about to start streaming Super Mario Bros. 2. See you there.